Greetings and welcome to an extensive exploration of one of the most infamous and terrifying villains in all of fantasy literature, Sauron. Known by an array of fearsome titles such as the Lord of the Rings, the Dark Lord, and the Lord of Darkness, Sauron is a figure whose legacy inspires both dread and fascination. But beneath the many layers of myth and legend, what is Sauron's true form? Is he indeed immortal, as many believe? In this video, we shall undertake a detailed examination of Sauron's dark origins, his incredible powers, and the unsettling nature of his immortality. Join us as we uncover the many dimensions of Sauron's existence and how he shaped the history of Middle-earth in his quest for domination. Before we delve into the intricate history of Sauron, if you are as captivated by the vast and complex lore of Middle-earth as we are, take a moment to support this channel by liking this video and subscribing. This will ensure you are always up to date on our latest content as we continue to bring you deeper into the fascinating worlds of Tolkien and beyond. To fully comprehend Sauron's malevolence and his immense significance, we must first understand that he was not always the embodiment of pure evil that many know him as today. In the earliest days of Middle-earth, when the world was still young and teeming with powerful beings, Sauron was counted among them. He was originally one of the Maiar, angelic entities created by Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme deity of J.R.R. Tolkien's universe. The Maiar were lesser Ainur spiritual beings whose purpose was to assist the Valar, the more powerful Ainur, in shaping and governing the world. Sauron's original name was Mairon, meaning the admirable or the excellent, a reflection of his noble and virtuous beginnings. In his early days, Sauron's talents and purpose were centered around aiding the great Vala Aufle, who was the master of craft, creation, and design. Under Aule's guidance, Sauron developed an extraordinary aptitude for craftsmanship and a deep understanding of the order and structure of the world. His desire for perfection, a trait that at first seemed harmless or even admirable, would later evolve into something far darker: a lust for absolute control. Despite his initial alignment with goodness, Sauron was drawn to the idea of power, and it was this fascination that would lead him down a path of corruption. Sauron's ambition soon caught the attention of Morgoth, the first and greatest Dark Lord in Tolkien's legendarium. Morgoth, originally known as Melkor, was the most powerful of the Valar who had rebelled against the divine order established by Ilúvatar. He sought to dominate all of creation for himself, and his immense power and rebellion against the other Valar inspired Sauron. Seeing in Morgoth a means of realizing his own desire for control, Sauron gradually abandoned his original purpose, turning away from the Valar to become Morgoth's most trusted and devoted lieutenant. Under Morgoth's dark influence, Sauron's vision of order became warped and twisted. Rather than seeking to create harmony and beauty through his craftsmanship, he began to desire control over all things. His once pure ambition to perfect the world transformed into a relentless drive to dominate it. This shift marked the beginning of Sauron's descent into evil, and his service to Morgoth would shape much of the chaos and destruction that ensued in the First Age of Middle-earth. As Morgoth's right hand, Sauron played a pivotal role in the wars that raged during the First Age. His talents in sorcery, manipulation, and deception were invaluable to Morgoth's cause. While Morgoth ruled primarily through brute strength and terror, Sauron was more cunning. He preferred to corrupt the hearts of men, elves, and dwarves through lies, trickery, and subtlety, making him an even more insidious threat. He worked behind the scenes to turn the hearts and minds of Middle-earth's inhabitants to Morgoth's dark purposes, and his mastery of dark sorcery only strengthened his ability to sow chaos. Even after Morgoth's eventual defeat at the end of the First Age, Sauron did not abandon his quest for power. In fact, in many ways, he became even more dangerous. Whereas Morgoth sought only to destroy, Sauron sought to control. His ambitions were far more calculating, and he was determined to carry on his master's dark legacy, albeit in his own way. After Morgoth's defeat and banishment from the world, Sauron went into hiding for a time, but his lust for dominion never diminished. As the Second Age dawned, he resurfaced, more determined than ever to bring all of Middle-earth under his rule. Recognizing that sheer conquest alone would not be sufficient to achieve his goals, Sauron adopted a more subtle and devious strategy. He decided that in order to dominate Middle-earth, he would need to deceive its inhabitants. To this end, Sauron disguised himself as a benevolent figure, adopting the fair and noble guise of Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. In this form, he approached the elves of Middle-earth, offering them his knowledge and guidance. He claimed that he wished only to help them bring beauty and order to the world, and many elves, particularly those in the kingdom of Eregion, welcomed him. Among those who were most influenced by Anatar was Celebrimbor, a masterful elven smith and the grandson of Feanor, the creator of the legendary Silmarils. Together with Celebrimbor and the other elven smiths of Eregion, Sauron began the crafting of the Rings of Power, magical artifacts of immense strength that could grant their bearers great power and prolonged life. However, unbeknownst to the elves, Sauron's intentions were far more sinister. While the elves forged their rings, Sauron secretly created the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. This ring, infused with a significant portion of Sauron's own power, was the key to controlling all the other rings and, by extension, their bearers. Through the One Ring, Sauron sought to enslave the minds of the elves, men, and dwarves who wore the Rings of Power. His plan was nearly flawless, but the elves were not so easily deceived. Upon realizing Sauron's treachery, they removed their rings and kept them hidden from his grasp. Enraged by their resistance, Sauron waged war on the elves, determined to reclaim the Rings of Power and consolidate his control over Middle-earth. Though Sauron was able to capture some of the rings, particularly those intended for men and dwarves, the elves kept their three most powerful rings, Narya, Nenya, and Velia, beyond his reach. These three rings remained hidden, and though Sauron always sought them, he was never able to claim them for himself. While the elves proved resilient to his schemes, Sauron found more success in corrupting men. He distributed 9 rings to the leaders of men who were far more susceptible to the lure of power and immortality. Over time, these men fell completely under Sauron's control. Their bodies, minds, and souls were utterly dominated by the One Ring, and they were transformed into the Nazgul, Sauron's most feared and terrifying servants. The Nazgul, or ring wraiths, were neither truly alive nor dead. They existed in a shadowy state, bound to Sauron's will and unable to escape his influence. As immortal specters, they became his most loyal and fearsome lieutenants, carrying out his dark will across Middle-earth. But Sauron's influence over men did not end with the creation of the Nazgul. His greatest act of manipulation and corruption came in the form of his dealings with the kingdom of Numenor. Numenor was the most powerful kingdom of men during the Second Age, a prosperous island nation that had been gifted to the men who fought against Morgoth in the First Age. The Númenóreans were strong, wise, and long-lived. but they were also plagued by a deep fear of death. Recognizing this vulnerability, Sauron allowed himself to be captured by the Númenóreans, knowing that once within their kingdom, he could corrupt them from within. Once in Númenor, Sauron quickly rose to a position of influence, manipulating the Númenóreans' fear of mortality. He convinced their king, Ar-Pharazôn, that the Valar, the gods of Middle-earth, had denied them immortality out of jealousy, and that by defying the Valar, they could achieve eternal life. Sauron's corruption of Númenor led to its ultimate downfall. Under his influence, the Númenóreans turned away from their ancient alliances with the Elves and the Valar, embracing a brutal and expansionist empire. Sauron even convinced them to worship Morgoth as a god, and they began to perform human sacrifices in his name. This manipulation culminated in the greatest disaster of the Second Age, the destruction of Númenor. Ar-Pharazôn, spurred on by Sauron, launched an ill-fated invasion of Valinor, the land of the gods, in a bid to claim immortality. In response, Eru Ilúvatar intervened directly, sinking Númenor beneath the waves and reshaping the world. Though Sauron's physical body was destroyed in this cataclysm, his spirit endured, and he returned to Middle-earth, more determined than ever to dominate it. The devastation of Númenor was just one chapter in Sauron's long and destructive history. His abilities were vast and terrifying, a reflection of his status as one of the most powerful beings in Tolkien's universe. Among his most notable powers was his ability to change forms. In his early days, Sauron could assume many different shapes, both beautiful and monstrous, depending on his purpose. He often took on a fair and alluring form when he wished to deceive others, as he did with the elves of Eregion and the men of Númenor. However, after the destruction of Númenor, Sauron lost the ability to assume a fair appearance. From that point forward, he was bound to a dark and terrible form, reflecting the corruption of his spirit. This physical form, though imposing, was not his true essence. Sauron's true power lay in his connection to the One Ring, which was the source of much of his strength. When Sauron forged the One Ring, he infused it with a significant portion of his own power. This bound his fate to the ring, making him nearly invincible as long as the ring existed. The One Ring amplified Sauron's abilities, allowing him to dominate the minds of those who wore the other rings of power and to extend his influence across Middle-earth. However, this also created a critical vulnerability. If the One Ring were ever destroyed, Sauron would be severely weakened, perhaps even beyond recovery. In addition to his connection to the One Ring, Sauron was a master of necromancy, earning him the title of the Necromancer during the events of The Hobbit. His mastery of dark sorcery allowed him to command the spirits of the dead, control the wills of living beings, and project his influence across vast distances. Even without a physical form, Sauron's presence was enough to strike fear into the hearts of men and elves alike. A powerful symbol of Sauron's dominion was the Eye of Sauron, an image immortalized by the Lord of the Rings films. This all-seeing eye represented Sauron's vigilance and his relentless search for the One Ring. Though the eye itself was largely a cinematic interpretation, it effectively captured the psychological terror that Sauron instilled in his enemies. In the books, Sauron is not merely an eye, but an ever-watchful force whose influence reaches every corner of Middle-earth. His very name evokes dread, serving as a reminder that his shadow looms over all who oppose him. Sauron's power, however, was not wielded alone. Throughout his long history, he had many servants who carried out his will. Chief among these was the Mouth of Sauron, his dark lieutenant and ambassador. Once a man, the mouth of Sauron became so corrupted by his master's influence that he forgot his own name and identity, living solely to serve Sauron. Through the mouth of Sauron, Sauron spread fear and intimidation, further extending his reach across Middle-earth. Another key group of Sauron's servants were the Nazgul, the 9 kings of men who had been corrupted by the power of the rings. These ring wraiths were bound to Sauron through the One Ring, and were his most loyal and terrifying followers. Neither alive nor dead, they were immortal and utterly devoted to Sauron's cause. Their mere presence was enough to terrify even the bravest warriors of Middle-earth. Despite his vast power, Sauron was not invincible. Like all Maya, Sauron was immortal in the sense that his spirit could not be completely destroyed. However, his physical form could be slain, and his dependence on the One Ring made him vulnerable. When the One Ring was finally destroyed at the end of the Third Age, Sauron lost the ability to ever take physical form again. Though his spirit persisted, it was so weakened that he could no longer exert any meaningful influence over Middle-earth. In this way, Sauron's immortality was a double-edged sword. While he could not be killed in the traditional sense, his power was inextricably tied to the One Ring. Without it, he was reduced to a shadow of his former self, a disembodied evil spirit, rather than the terrifying Dark Lord who had once threatened all of Middle-earth. In conclusion, Sauron stands as the embodiment of dark ambition, the master of deception, and the wielder of overwhelming power. His story spans millennia, from his humble beginnings as a servant of Morgoth to his near conquest of Middle-earth. Though he may no longer have a physical form, his presence lingers in the lore of Tolkien's world, a reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and the insatiable lust for power. As we draw this deep dive to a close, let me leave you with a thought-provoking question. Is Sauron truly the greatest Dark Lord in all of fiction? Or does another villain, perhaps Voldemort or someone else, pose an even greater threat? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of the rich worlds of fantasy and lore.